What's up, YouTube? We're back with one of my favorite video series on my channel, helping you get better at leather crafting. I have a ton of submissions of people who sent in their work for me to critique, maybe give some pointers, maybe I can tell them, change this, change that. We have a ton of submissions. Okay, so first person we got is RH Custom Leather. They say their biggest struggle is drawing floral. They say that it's not as long and as flowy as they'd like. So let's take a look. So the first thing they sent me is this rope can bag, which I gotta be honest is pretty clean. I really actually like the look of this. It's just so clean, simple, punchy. I really like the buck stitch around the outside, that big wide lace that looks almost like half-inch buck stitch or something crazy. I actually really like the flowers, and I also like the floral. That diamond pattern on the back looks super nice. Looks like you got a little bit of wobbles up top, but that happens. I'm not gonna pick your part too bad on that. Just obviously keep your swivel knife straight, true, where your lines need to go. My only takeaway with your floral not being long and flowy is I actually have to disagree. I actually think your floral is like too long and too flowy. I think what it is that you're looking to fulfill or fix is actually that your floral is not full enough. I personally think your floral is gonna look a lot more full. So for example, you see the space that I'm filling in up here. You have all this dead space where your backgrounder is kind of like, not really that smooth. I think if you were to work on filling that in, maybe throwing a leaf in up there, or maybe adding a second vine in this zone to take it out a little bit farther and then throwing your loop. I think your vines are plenty long enough. I mean, if you look at this one particular vine that loops out and around starts from basically the cow head all the way up and around, I think that's long and flowy enough. I think you just need to fill your space in better. I mean, you got some really nice dog collars. They seem cute, simple. These hair clips, also simple, really cute. Nothing wrong with doing simple stuff that's maybe not so filled in. I think one of my only critiques is maybe a little less simple. For example, on this dog collar right here, I personally would have ran my diamonds all the way across just so it looks more kind of cohesive instead of just kind of like abruptly stopping into nothingness. Or if you are gonna stop into nothingness, make it a little bit more fadey. You want it to look a little bit more thought out, not like you're just, collaging these different elements together. But I mean, this wall is really pretty. She also said that she struggles with her belt not seeming flowy enough. And I think your belt could use a little bit more flow and length. So I do see a drastic drop off on the quality of your floral on your other pieces versus your belt. It looks like this might be a tap off. You can see this pattern's kind of repeating itself a bunch. The main thing I don't like about your work, and I think will help your work, is there's so much background space. Some people like a ton of background space. I'm personally not a fan of that. I like my floral seeming full. Leather, floral tooling is kind of an abstract idea, but it is supposed to kind of emulate vines and stuff like that. If you think about it that way, plants, when they're healthy, they're nice and they're full and they're luscious and they're, just nice and full, right? So if you want to kind of fix some of that flow problem you're having, just scooting over the one flower so it just touches the vine, then it won't seem like it's so stubby. It'll just look like a shorter chunk of floral. So you have to, maybe if you can't figure out how to make your floral so flowy, you can do other things to kind of make it at least not seem so bad, if that makes sense. This feather belt right here, a little bit more flowy. It's definitely more full. You can see those vines, on your other pieces, your super long vines. This belt piece right here, those vines are super long. So this is definitely an improvement, right? From the last belt we just looked at. You do some pretty cute stuff. I don't really see a huge problem with it. One thing I will say, just looking at this bouquet wrap, I'm not a real big fan of the barground or background because it kind of ends up looking really choppy. You start getting these really solid geometric stamps, this left row of bargrounder stamps you're using. And it's nice, even geometric, but then you start seeing where you start tilting it, and to me that kind of makes it look a little sloppy. So something to consider So if you kind of tighten up other things that you're doing, your weak points that you're working on might not necessarily, stick out like such a sore thumb because everything else has kind of come together. And then at that point, it kind of turns into a personal style or a personal preference. It's crazy because I see this wallet and your floral looks really good. Or what exactly, but one thing that I am noticing is either use patterns for everything and learn how to draw on the side and wait until you're good enough at drawing to start doing your drawing and your tooling on your pieces, or abandon the patterns altogether and just have a consistent style throughout, because you will piss people off where you go, wow, I saw this wallet I really liked of yours with the sunflowers on it, and they might order a belt and expect the same level of tooling, and then you kind of fall short. So that's something to be a little careful of. The last thing is this belt chunk right here maybe looks like you drew it. The biggest thing I'm seeing is that you're kind of beveling things the wrong way. Like these three petals that kind of go off the edge, they're layered opposite. So your vines, you should start, let's say we're moving from this way, that your floral is pointing this way. So when you're drawing the vines, you need to start at the end and draw your long lines going this way, and then come into the next vine and then draw them like that, and then the next vine, and then pull it, and then pull it, and then pull it down the line like that. To me, it looks like you might be starting here and then trying to like add flow as you go. Whereas if you do it the first way that I'm describing, your first vine But for the most part, somebody who doesn't do this full time, and you're just doing it kind of as a hobby, it looks like you're taking it a little bit more seriously now. Honestly, pretty solid work. Definitely could use some help here and there, and, make sure you keep practicing and stuff like that. But, you do have a lot of solid things going for you. Everything that you do is kind of really pretty. So your colors are really nice. Your paint's pretty solid. You have a good foundation. All you need to do is kind of work out the kinks, really. You're at a great stage as well because you have so much down fundamentally, but you're at a really fun part of the learning process. It's probably really frustrating because you're banging your head against the wall going like, why can't I figure this shit out? But when you do start, you're at that point where when you start figuring certain things out, it's like huge improvements of quality. So you're at a great spot. RH Custom Leather, I can't wait to see what you come up with in the future, homegirl. So the next person we got is Adam Bush. So Adam Bush is a leather hobbyist. He says he has no intentions of making a profession out of it, which is a good idea. Being an artist for a living is super tough, so I respect the hell out of that. He says that his finish work is his biggest concern, and he feels like he needs to work on getting tooling that's less choppy. So let's see what he's got. It's funny that he says that because I actually think his finish work is kind of his strong point. For example, this little, I don't know if this is a wallet or like a coin purse, what you would call it. I actually really like the color, and I don't really think it's that choppy. I mean, I'm kind of zooming in right here. There's a little bit of unsmoothness, and the curvature is a little choppy, but you're not getting steps. Basically, that will kind of work itself through time. You can kind of tap more and kind of smooth those lines and kind of sculpt them. So that's not something I would be too worried about. That's literally just something that's going to come with hand-eye coordination and just learning how to sculpt it a little bit better. But I will say your finish work seems to be like one of the things that I actually like the most. This keychain, it's not really stained, so your stamp doesn't really pop. Same with this like infinity keychain deal. Going with raw leather always looks really rough and janky because you can kind of see a lot of the fibers, which make it look maybe sloppy. But like this little basket weave keychain you got, this thing is buttery, man. Like this, I mean, your basket weaves line up. Like, look at the grid on that. That's, I mean, proper. This is beautiful right here. So you're on a really good path, man. One thing that I think you're doing very correctly is you're not going too crazy. You're not taking on these projects that are drastically out of your skill level, which is something that's super, super helpful, especially when you're a beginner or a hobbyist or something like that. Larger projects when you're just starting out can definitely get away from you pretty easy. I mean, even the interior, I don't know if you cut this interior or got it out of a kit or you actually cut this interior, but that's saying something that I can't tell if it is or isn't. I mean, I don't think it's out of a kit. Most kits don't fit together this nicely. So personally, I don't think your, finish work is really something you need to worry about. But just to humor you, if I had to really nitpick your finish work, like the internal edges of this pocket, the edges aren't finished. So maybe just, spend an extra minute or two finishing edges and little details. But even this little head, this little skull is super sick. Your colors are really nice and rich. You even did the little fade in the eye socket, which is pretty badass, and then you throw some stain on it. Like there is nothing I can nitpick about your finish work. It's really solid, actually. Let's go into this next project. I mean, even like this little thing with the gussets, this thing is really cool. I think sometimes when people are beginners, one thing they don't necessarily understand is like all the different components of leather work. And when they don't understand all the like specific components, it's hard to really put a pinpoint on why you're not happy with your own work. Or, for example, like I don't think it's necessarily the finish work that you need to work on, more so like how your piece looks overall when it's done, if that makes sense. For example, like on this purse wallet thing, your finish work is like the glaze on the outside, your edges, how tidy is your stitching, stuff like that. And that's all stuff I literally can't find anything wrong with. If I had to nitpick this particular thing, I would say that if you would have thrown a border right here on the edge where this flower goes and where this flower goes down here, you wouldn't have this kind of awkward line here where your stitching goes over your flower. What I would have done if I was you is thrown a little, just a little border to kind of cap this in. And then that way you could have even maybe made this petal right here, like come over the border and do something three-dimensional. Sometimes people will want to stretch their pieces and their artwork as large as possible, but then they run into the problem of stitching going over it, and then that kind of looks awkward. That's not your stitching having a problem, that's your initial design having a problem, where steps later on in the finishing process, such as your stitching, start to conflict with it. So it's not that your stitching and your finish work has a problem, it's the early stage design stuff. Like you're kind of using your stitch line as a border, which there's nothing wrong with, but it is gonna give you that kind of awkward look where you're like, this doesn't really make a lot of sense. But yeah, I mean, like this little pouch thing is crispy. I mean, your stitching is dead nuts on, even your stamps are true. Your spacing on your stamps is good. I don't think your finish work is the thing you need to work on. Honestly, man, for somebody who's been fiddling around with this for a year as a hobby, you are fucking killing it. Super solid, really no complaints. Your little skull dude right here, super clean, crispy. The only thing I can complain about is you didn't throw a border on this particular wallet, which then kind of gives you this awkward kind of thing that happens with your stitching becoming the border. But other than that, man, super solid. Adam Bush, keep killing it, man. All right, our next dude is Jesse. Hinojosa. He sent me in 3 knife sheaths to check out, and honestly, this is gonna be pretty hard to pick apart. I mean, really, these are super solid knife sheaths, man. Like these, you know, I have to be super hypercritical because there's really not a lot to pick apart without just basically being, you know, super nitpicky. So we'll start on the first one. I really like this thing. The only thing I could really pick apart is maybe, you know, having a little bit more of that Texas visible. I know it's Texas, and I'm sure most people will know it's Texas, but from a distance, people might not, you know, fully understand that that's Texas until you kind of get up on top of it. And then this vine right here that I'm zooming in on is a little thin and awkward. When it comes to floral, you want everything to be kind of flowing together, which helps with that directional kind of flowy, elegant vibe, especially when you have, you know, you'll have all these lines kind of curving into each other, and then you have this one chunk that's just parallel. It can kind of look awkward. You could have just maybe blown that radius out a little bit wider, and it would have given you a nice, more circular look because it's got a little bit of an oval to it. This next one, this AH, I actually really like how that little scroll with the ball kind of comes up and hugs over the top of the A. I actually really like that. I also like how the A and the H are kind of connected. I don't know if that's like a brand or that was your own design choice, but I really like this thing. Now, my personal preference is I would have really liked to have seen this filled in a little bit more. Maybe you could have turned that flower on its side so it didn't have the 2 empty spots, you know, side to side on the flower, which could have probably allowed you to bring that floral down a little bit more and come up and closed off that space on the side of your floral as well. I'm not a huge big fan of the empty spaces. Those empty spaces is making me go like, why didn't you just fill in the empty spaces? You know, even then, like, you could have easily done this piece without framing yourself or boxing yourself in, and just avoided those giant background chunks altogether and just had it one solid chunk of floral. This, I love this thing too. The way that you are interlocking things and layering things, how the loop goes in front of that breast cancer ribbon, but then the breast cancer ribbon is on top of, you know, the floral at the top. I really like that. I think your composition is really good. The way you lay things out is very nice. The only negative thing I can point out really is this vine here at the top. I don't know what you had in mind with this. I don't know what that is. Why it dips down and comes up and over, to me, is super awkward. You should have just taken those vines that go down the side and just rounded it out up at the top right here at the zoom where I'm zooming in. You know, this weird divot down you have, to me, just doesn't make it like any sense. It would have been, in my opinion, flawless. But for the most part, man, pretty solid. Another dude who does this as a hobby. He's a firefighter. Thank you for your service, man. I don't know if I'm telling you anything new, but super solid for a dude who fights fires for a living. You know what I mean? So as a hobby, you are fucking slaying it as a hobby, man. So keep it up. I'd love to see you do some more projects that aren't just sheaths. I think you're at the point now where you're ready to start taking on some different projects. I'd love to see maybe, at least want to see some wallets, some other maybe simple, smaller projects, but you're there. I think you're ready for the next step, man. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope whoever I just went over, you guys learned something from that. If you're just a fan of leather crafting or my channel in general, can kind of see all the different thoughts and elements that professionals, when they look at their own work or look at other people's work, there's so much to dissect. They're looking at every single line, every single stamp, every single decision they make, every single brushstroke, every single everything when they're creating their work. So if you're a person out there who wants to get better at leather crafting and you want to submit your work to me, you can hit me up on Instagram. It's going to be the best bet for you. Link down there in the description below. Let me know, hey, I saw your video. I want you to give me some tips. I'm always willing to lend a helping hand. I might even do one of these videos where I actually break down my own work. But if you like that video, please drop a like, a comment, subscribe, all that stuff. I appreciate all the support everybody's given us. All the links down in the description below. Being leather,